It's Real Talk, Episode 12, Robert Eggers. Which of his films will score the highest on today's show? Cinematographer Christina Dobre drops in for some New England clam chowder and to review The Witch. Jimmy the Toucan is back, in spite of some wayward seabirds, to make history with our grades of The Lighthouse. And creation horror author Joe Belcastro is back for the second week in a row to help This Lion score 2024's Nosferatu. Now quick, like this episode, subscribe, or it'll give you sibling to a Skarsgård.
Real Talk is powered by Real Digital. If you work for a brand or agency producing content, keep it real by setting up a consultation at www.realdigital.media to see how your next campaign can come in ahead of schedule and under budget.
It's 1630, we're in New England, and there's no clam chowder in sight. If you're curious where humans were at in their social evolution then, the letter W wasn't even in common use yet, and would often be represented by two U's or V's. But Robert Eggers' 21st century entry into feature-length directing is less concerned with copy and mainly focused on cult. Rewatching The Witch after viewing Eggers' three other films, it's easy to see a style blueprint being laid out that the filmmaker continues to follow a decade later. I'm beyond appreciative of Eggers' writing approach that completely adapts to the time period his stories take place in while maintaining a constant visual style and collaboration with Yaron Blonsky that unifies his canon of films thus far. The Witch is an exercise in taking as basic and well-known a fable as there is and presenting it with such realism it seems completely new. From the haunting cinematography that leans on natural light to the unsettling hellish score and a collection of wickedly authentic performances, The Witch reminds us that paranoia and blind faith are a lethal combination. I'm super excited to be joined in the jungle today by the antithesis of a witch, cinematographer extraordinaire, the incredible Christina Dobre. Christina, you mind banging out the Lord's Prayer before we get started? No reason, I promise. No reason at all.
Just want to...
I don't know if I'm not a witch. Oh
wow,
never
horrible.
said that.
I appreciate the transparency. I'm literally caught in a vine. I don't know what's happening. Sorry.
That wasn't me.
Yeah, some rich witchcraft right out of the gate. Look, I appreciate the transparency. I mean, for those, who can't see, you did just take a drink of water, which I think proves you're not a witch. Or maybe a shower you don't do. Anyway, we'll get into it. On a serious note, it's lovely to have you here. Thank you so much for coming to the jungle today.
Thank you for having me.
To hear your thoughts on any movie, but let alone this picture. I'm curious, when was the first time you saw The Witch?
It was definitely a couple years ago, but I've always been fascinated with horror, especially period piece drama horror or Gothic horror. My father's Romanian, so I always came up with this notion that I had some ties to vampires. So I remember really enjoying it a while ago, and I just recently watched it again as spooky season is upon us and moving past us. I love a good horror film, and they did a great job with this one.
Within the horror genre, there's all sorts of subgenres, but I really love this hyper-realistic period horrors that are all sort of based around the occult. This does, emanate from European culture, so it's so deeply embedded in us, and I think the way that he brings it out is is so unique and interesting. I would love to know your thoughts on the plot of The Witch.
That is a deep one.
Yeah.
Well,
I like to open with a softball,
The plot of The Witch, I felt, was a slow burn, but I enjoy a slow burn, especially when it is a period piece. And so I find it fascinating to hear how they speak, and it was easy to follow. But in terms of just watching this religious family get outcast and then it all devolve into madness, and then we find this daughter who clearly is repressed and innocent, so we think, and see her find her coven is very fascinating. I think it's done in a really interesting way, because I think, and we can talk about if we think that she knew all along there were witches or if it really was those young twins. But I found it really fascinating. Nice slow burn.
You walk away going, wait, was she the witch the whole time? Or did she, as is often the case, whether you're talking about generational trauma or in real life, did she get pulled into this thing just by virtue of being accused of it her whole life? Or not her whole life, but for the purposes of the film. And so, yeah, it
Hmm.
becomes a great analogy about culture while even on the surface level, just still being a really spooky story that's layered and interesting. And for those who haven't seen the film, it is, again, pretty straightforward. You mentioned there's a family that's sort of banished by their community. So they live on a small, I mean, I hesitate to call it a farm. It's a struggling farm. They're trying to grow corn, and they've clearly been cursed. There's a witch who lives in the woods who's abducted their youngest child. Just spooky stuff happens and keeps happening up until the end. And it's kind of dissension into madness where the family is accusing each other, trying to figure out who the witch is because they believe the witch is within the family. Very well may be. But we get to the third act, and there's this figure that appears. I'm just curious, who do you think that was?
Yeah. After watching it again, I realized that I might have even missed this character because it was such a dark space that if you're not looking, you almost miss this dark figure standing behind her. And to me, it read that it was the human or spiritual figure of this Black Eddie goat, which is either some form of demon in dark witchcraft guiding her to this coven, or it is the devil himself, as like the younger kids said that they were doing dealings with Black Eddie and the devil. And when she is walking away in that open field, I do see that black goat kind of following,
Yes,
trailing
you're right.
behind her.
Yes, of
And it
course.
kind of felt like it was either the devil doing this trade with her to give her everything she's wanted, or it is, the dark side of herself. Let's embrace everything that we're not supposed to do. What do you think?
I kind of interpret it as the devil. John Carpenter kind of does this a lot, especially in his early work, where he opens his film and the camera is the POV of the monster or the slasher, whoever it is.
Hmm.
And I feel like there's a little bit of that going on in this movie where we're constantly just sort of looking out into the woods. I live in the jungle, so I don't feel creeped out in jungles at all. Those are the scariest woods I've ever seen in my life. I don't want to be anywhere near those woods.
They're
Um,
terrifying.
Even those sort of slow POV shots, it's very easy to assume it's coming from the family, but I feel like that is kind of again a potential representation of the devil who's just sort of always there. And there's even a great,
Absolutely.
I should probably save this next bit. In fact, I will for the visual storytelling. But I say all that because yeah, when we see him at that point and he's just sort of in the shadows and you barely see him at all, I felt like, oh yeah, that's got to be the devil. Who else could that be? Um,
Absolutely. And it presented as this handsome figure too. And in a lot of spiritual storytelling and religious storytelling, this devil figure can present themselves as this tempting, luring, dark, handsome figure,
I think
especially women.
hey, I'm a lion. I think I've met that guy a few times. All right, you work in this business long enough. He pops up. So I want to get a score for the plot from you. 1 out of 10. Christina,
Mm.
what do you give the witch's plot?
I would give The Witch's Plot an 8 out of 10.
That brings us to characters and performances. We were just talking about the devil, maybe. I want to kind of transition maybe to the other sort of male lead, William, the father character in this, because I mean, he's just kind of a pawn. Like, let's face it, I think he's the only one in the movie you're like, oh, that guy's definitely not the witch. Like, both because he's a dude, but also because he's clearly just kind of being played by everybody from the twins to the wife to the whatever.
I thought William, and I think his name's Ralph,
Yes.
did such an excellent job in terms of acting. It was incredibly believable and disturbing to watch, especially nearing the ending of the film. But he was a really interesting character to think about because he's the reason why they all had to be outcast because of his pride. And then you see in the end him asking forgiveness because of his pride. And it's very hypocritical of what he's telling his family and his children to do. And then he feels like he is the reason why they're all cursed. So it is very interesting to watch him devolve into madness too.
And he does even say when they're talking about returning to town, he says, we can't return as beggars. So
Yeah,
to your point about pride, it's just like, but you're kind of begging. You're kind of begging, you know?
you
And
are you are begging. Why do you
yeah,
have so much pride? Maybe it's making your family, maybe it has ruined your family and you are to blame.
Yeah, and even then Kate Dickey, who plays Catherine, who's the
Hmm.
wife, she has this really kind of heartbreaking scene where she admits that she wants to go home, she wants to go back to England. And yeah, you sort of get the sense that she's never really wanted to be there, regardless if she's the witch or not the witch. There is sort of sympathy for everyone in this situation because as hard as life must have been, they've definitely found themselves in a situation where they're all again sort of trying to support William, the dad, and it's just
Yeah.
it ain't working.
He's failing for everything, and he's lying and blaming his children for things, yet protesting that he's this honest Christian man.
Dad of the Year, he is official nomination in for Real Talks Dad of the Year. We don't
Absolutely.
this is maybe the first candidate, so he's locked in. Anya Taylor-Joy, she had a little something to do with this movie. She's got a couple scenes.
Mm. She's always striking to watch. She's just haunting as a character to start. You can tell how much she's devoted to her parents' belief systems and how much shame she has for all the maybe horrible thoughts she does have. But I found it really interesting as the story progresses how much she made me question if she really was the witch or, is she lying to her siblings when she's saying that she did let like that ugly witch in the woods steal her younger brother, or was she just taunting them? Because she did repent every time. So I loved her character. I think I'm happy that she found her coven in the end.
I love that takeaway that this was like a happy ending, that like, yeah, several people were slaughtered, but she found her clique, and at the end, no, I can appreciate it. Look, I am a male lion, so I'm surrounded by a coven of female lions, you might say,
Right.
in nature.
You
So
get it then.
I get it. I totally get it. I can't fly. I wish I could fly. That'd be cool. But, a lion
Me
can.
too.
Anya has this sort of like, I mean, obviously she has these incredible eyes that just, they're very easy to look at. But I think from a performing standpoint,
Mm,
humans connect with a handful of things when they're looking at a face. Obviously, the eyes are the most distinct, and when a performer is blessed with these kind of larger eyes, it really is a tool. But she uses it so well, and there's
yeah.
all this subtle range she explores in this role because, yeah, you don't like. At some point, she seems like a totally innocent kid. At some point, she seems like maybe this hellish mastermind who's torturing her
Hmm.
family. Then there's even moments where she thinks she might accidentally be doing it, and so especially at what would have been such a young age, to have.
Yeah, she was very young in this film.
You talk about repression earlier. You mentioned that there are just enough moments to establish that Caleb, her younger brother, is starting to kind of experience and feel things as a man
Yeah,
and is sort of looking at her in ways. And I just, again, as a creator, as a director, as a writer, I can imagine that might be a difficult conversation to have with a young woman of like, hey, how do we play this? But she handles it really well. And I don't know, it's just hard not to be
absolutely.
super impressed by her in this film.
Yeah, absolutely. And the dynamic between her and her mother, and how her mother is blaming her for everything and really turns on her, and how she has to defend herself despite still really loving her mother, is really, really heartbreaking to watch.
Yeah, no, there is this constant dedication and, like you said earlier, devotion to her family, even though they're just the worst to her. Like everybody's just
Hmm.
terrible. And any moment of joy she has, any fun she has, is immediately something bad happens, whether she's playing peekaboo with her younger sibling, whether she's just comforting her brother, and then she's sort of accused of something terrible, and or even if she's just playfully bullying her kind of rotten younger sibling. She's that's
Yeah.
Before I get a grade out of you, I want to play a little game because there are some great human characters,
Okay.
but there's also some animal characters, and I figured we didn't really talk about them a whole lot. I thought maybe we'd talk about them more, but I said we should name them. We should give them names. So that's the
Let's do
game. We're gonna name the
it.
three characters. I'm gonna give you an animal from The Witch, and you're gonna give it a name. I know the goat kind of has a name, so you can
Yeah,
or
that one
goat.
has
You
a
can
name.
either go with the goat's name or you can give it a new name. But the first characters, not the goat, because we're going to go in order of appearance. The first one is the little brown bunny.
Mm,
What would you name the little brown bunny?
the deceitful hair.
Okay, I was thinking more of like Carl or something, but that is I mean, that's a hell of a name. Okay, the deceitful
Carl
hair.
sounds pretty good too. Because they led them astray, right?
See, I was, or
Deceitful Carl.
Sniffles maybe, because he did kind of, he
That's
was
true.
always
You know,
sniff
that's a kinder name.
than Carl the deceitful hair. All right, I'm gonna put in Carl the deceitful hair, aka Sniffles. And then next up, of course, we do have the black goat, which was it Eddie? What do they call him in the movie? See,
Black Eddie.
Black Eddie, which yeah, that might not fly these days. So other than Black Eddie, maybe we can come up with a more PC name for the goat.
He was a pain in the ass.
He really
And
was.
killed the dad in the end.
Killed William. He did kill William. Maybe we call Willie Jr.
He's the new father in the end. So
Yeah.
Willie Jr. does make sense.
Willie Jr. locking it in. And then finally we have I don't know any other way to the crow.
Mm. Oh.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Black Crow.
The areola crow. I don't know other way to say it. Yeah.
Maybe Butter the Crow.
Butter the crow. Is there a reason butter? I'm just curious. Is there something I'm missing? I just want to make sure there's not.
Gender neutral name
I love it.
for
I
the
love it.
crow.
Butter the crow.
He does like milk, clearly.
I would say so. Let's name the creepy animals. And yeah, we have named the little brown bunny Carl the deceitful hare, aka Sniffles. Then the goat we have renamed Willie Jr. and then the crow we have named Butter the Crow. So let us know in the comments what you might have named them. Or
Very original.
yeah, no, I love it. Well, let's move on to something that is an actual staple of the show, which is grading the characters and performances 1 out of 10.
I would give the characters' performances a 10 out of 10 for this. I think all of their acting was solid.
Visual storytelling. Now, Christina, this is really what I want to talk to you about. I want to just give you the floor to just talk about whatever you want, but I want to bring up one thing in particular first, because there's this shot very, very early on
Yes.
when our little baby brother, sister, I don't remember what it was, but goes missing. Speaking of butter, it looks like he's getting churned up. Then there's this sort of shot of the witch, and it could be two things, and this is what I want to say. It could be the witch either sort of rising up in front of the moon, but what I really saw when I looked back was just sort of a bird. It seemed like a bird, almost like an owl, just sort of perched.
Absolutely. Well, Jared did an incredible job in the cinematography for this film, but I agree. I think watching it a second time, I didn't realize how quickly we devolved into this horror genre theme and see this baby. First off, I'll say, excellent way of a jump scare. Such a simple way to quickly move the plot forward. I think none of us really expected it watching it for the first time. And then as we see this witch creature, and they shoot it in such a beautiful, dark way that we almost don't know that it's a witch yet. We see that it's some sort of creepy, disgusting creature, which is another thing that we can develop into another time, where it's always this like old, haggard woman. But I thought it was beautifully, beautifully done, and quickly informs me as a viewer that, okay, there's something more sinister going on here. And I wasn't sure. I was like, is that the baby's blood and guts here? It does certainly look like it. I love like Eggers and Jaren's work when it comes to horror and these like back silhouette, like grand shots of she clearly won here. She got the baby, and we'll see what happens after that.
And they use these great just like shafts of light, so you can just see enough. It's almost Hitchcockian in the way where you're seeing probably more than you want to, but you're like squinting. You're like, wait, what's that? Like you're looking at something you don't want to see. And I think that's really masterful because in all their movies, they're really presenting quite unpleasant things, but you're still somehow, at least I am always just fixated and, like I said, squinting and staring into the darkness, trying to see more.
Yeah, they do a beautiful job at deciding where our eyes go. And I love the use of darkness and these hot spots of light because it's the same way that when I'm standing in a dark room or a dark forest and I'm alone and I'm afraid, how I'd feel. And it makes me, the viewer, feel the same way of, is that what I think it is over there in the darkness?
Because in an
Hmm.
Eggert movie, it always
Yes, it
is.
is.
You think it
It
is.
sure
Yeah,
is.
you're like, oh, that's actually a lot worse than I thought it. Ah, I
Exactly.
want to get out of here. Is dark and violent and, unsettling as the beginning is, it does end in kind of I don't mean to make a pun here, in like an uplifting way. Like you really do feel like a sense of freedom. There's a sense of elevation. I mean, the characters are quite literally flying or floating. Because there are several moments where I thought the movie was over. It cuts to black. But by the time we get to the coven, I was like, okay, this is the end, and it feels like the right ending. It feels really appropriate. But you don't see that a lot of times in a horror movie where you kind of start scarier than you end.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting that you didn't find it scary in the end. And I didn't find it scary in the end the first time watching it and the second time either. I think interesting jump scare was going from that tight close up of them in the barn to that extreme wide
Oh,
of her
sure. Yeah.
walking naked. That one was very jump disturbing for me. It felt mostly unsettling because of that slow voyeuristic camera movement choice that they did, that it almost leaves you with like a pit in your gut, which I love when horror movies do. It's not necessarily a happy ribbon bow of everyone's dead or here's the killer. It's
Right.
like, oh, we're finding out the real reason everything's happening here, which is satisfying for me. So I thought it was really fascinating. Yeah, that I thought, is the film ending here? Oh no. Oh, she's there. She's alone. What is she going to do now? Now that her whole family's dead. Oh, Black Eddie is the devil. And there is a coven in the end, which is like a satisfying, disturbing way to end it.
Anya does such a great job of being the lead of the movie that
Hmm.
we as the audience, I don't know, I think I've just found a level of like satisfaction that maybe I
Definitely.
don't find in a lot of horror movies. So maybe I didn't articulate myself well in saying that it wasn't scary because it's more, I think, like I said, it's more about the satisfaction that you get and literally seeing her kind of rise up and fly. It's
Yeah.
just almost this like, oh, now she's above this stuff that she's been doing.
Yeah. It's almost, I feel like, because I felt like I was rooting for her most
Yeah.
of the film, where we could see that her intentions seemed good and she seemed like she was being genuine. So why is everyone turning on her? Everyone ended up really killing themselves here, and now she's getting what she wanted when she never really had that before. So it did feel satisfying in that way.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I
Mm.
mean, even down to the final kill, if you will. Although, do we see the twins get killed?
We don't.
Because I do remember thinking at one point like they might pop up again or something, that they were going to be responsible for something. But we do see, I mean, she is being strangled by her mother, and when she
Mhm.
kills her mother, I
She
mean,
does
it's
kill her
very
mother.
much an act of self-defense. And I think the film does a really good job of always positioning her in a place where you're like, yeah, that is some evil shit. Hard to defend killing your mom with an axe or a little hatchet, but she was being strangled.
Yeah, and Anya did such a great job at showing the despair in her eyes there. I really felt like she didn't want to kill her
Oh
mom.
yeah.
Her mom was strangling her, and that was her last defense line, which is really sad. I'll quickly touch on this because a couple years ago, I actually did go on a vacation at Plymouth, Massachusetts,
Oh, very
which is
cool.
where they have the whole pilgrim town. And the opening shot, I'm 99% sure, was shot in that town because it looked exactly like it. And it was interesting at how gray and dull and lifeless the color grade was and the lighting was throughout. It
It's
really made it feel so depressing. It almost feels like the most color we see is when she goes into the woods with the fire, or we're with the witch and it's like the blue full moon sky. So
Yeah.
those are interesting choices.
And even the witch is because she's seen a couple times, or at least once, that but she has this red cloak,
Mm,
that there's really this intense color. So yeah, there's this richness sort of associated the with the evil or with the witches, if you will. And even the use of candlelight is really
mm,
again kind of haunting. It's often in the foreground, which is an interesting choice. It's sort of in front of the characters, and there's even a scene early on with Caleb, the younger brother, where it almost is this there's like two wicks burning, and they're kind of positioned at an angle where it almost forms like a cross, and it
mm.
definitely had me
Yeah, it's a
thinking
great
like,
observation.
is he the bad one, or but now looking back on it, it's like, oh, is that maybe like an omen that this was sort of burning. So yeah,
Definitely. To follow up on that, there is also a really interesting frame when they're all having dinner, if you caught it, where the father is in the middle praying dinner and looks like Jesus at the
oh yeah,
final supper,
yeah, the last
with
supper,
the
yeah.
mother like in darkness in the foreground, and really makes you think, oh, like maybe this mother is evil and the father is this like good shepherd figure, which
Right.
is ironic when we find out the ending.
No, I love it, and that's again what's so great about their work together is that
Hmm.
all of their films, when you rewatch them, there's just so much going on, not just in the script,
Really
but
intentional,
the
yeah, symbolism.
cinematography. Yeah, and there's like no way you can catch everything in one screening. I think I've seen Nosferatu 4 times, and every
Hmm.
time I watch it, I'm like, there's something new. I just saw something new.
Hmm.
Uh, so yes, well, all of that said, 1 out of 10 visual storytelling.
For visual storytelling, I would give this film a 9 out of 10.
The 9 is locked in. That brings us to use of sound. This movie has, again, I think a very effective soundtrack. It has a very appropriate soundtrack, but definitely, especially if we're talking about Robert Eggers' canon, I think his other films have maybe a little bit more of a distinct soundtrack
Mm,
or stuff that you might walk away from the film thinking about. I could certainly say The Lighthouse has a
mm.
soundtrack that really stayed with me for like months after watching this movie or watching that movie. The Witch, not so much. Like, really appreciated and enjoyed it, but as soon as the movie's over, I'm just thinking about everything else.
I think that you're spot on saying that actually, because actually thinking back, I can remember the types of sound design they used and musical elements, but it wasn't anything that was like, oh, this is a score that I'm going to go home and listen to.
Right.
It was more, it felt like more intentional sound design to uplift any emotions that we're supposed to feel in the scenes, which I didn't hate. I loved that like the soundtrack and the sound design wasn't overpowering and didn't make me feel a certain way as a viewer. Like it wasn't like you have to be happy here, you know?
Right.
It just like lifted this dread that was already happening in the scenes, but it wasn't something as distinct as some other films that I've seen.
Yeah, and even there's this sort of sound that's used a handful of times that's kind of associated with the witchcraft, and it's very similar to the soundtrack used in 2001: A Space Odyssey that's associated with the obelisk. And so in fact, at some points, I wouldn't even be surprised if it's sampling the exact same music from that. It's very effectively used, but obviously not unique to the film. So that's kind of the bigger point I'm making. Yeah.
That's a great point. Yeah, that actually reminds me there are some musical notes of like screaming.
Yeah,
It sounds like women screaming in high pitched tones, which I did really enjoy. I do really enjoy in horror, especially something that is a period piece that feels like music wouldn't feel electronic in
of
any some sort
course.
of way.
Right.
Feels very like innate and primal. And I just watched a video of this one orchestra and chorus that sings this like very guttural primal type songs, and it's based off of, the witch trials and
Mm.
women screaming,
Yeah.
being lit on fire, and it felt very similar. I'm wondering if it's maybe from the same artist of this like guttural scream of women screaming. And I wonder if that was intentional
Yeah, no, I mean, it feels like it would be just because, yeah, that sort of howling, like you said, like screaming kind of into the openness of this air, just this, and how that's mixed in. And it is really, really kind of, I mean, it's very powerful when you're watching the film because even if you're just looking at a goat or you're looking at, a couple kids playing, all of a sudden there's this distinct shift in tone that feels completely supernatural. And I think it's
Hmm.
because it sounds like, yeah, almost this like collection of women screaming from hell, and you're just faintly hearing it sort of like breaking through.
Hmm.
1 out of 10, what would you give Use Sound?
I would give this film like a 7.5 out of 10. There's other films that I can think of where the score and the sound design are so much more powerful and intentional. Not to say I didn't like this film, as I really
Totally.
did really enjoy it and loved it, but I would give it a 7.5 out of 10.
Well, that brings us to the final category of theme. Again, this is, as it says in the beginning, this is a New England folk tale. So it feels very much like it's sort of aware of the handful of themes that it brings in, and everything it's presenting is kind of very clearly sort of an analogy for the themes that it's bringing.
Absolutely. I mean, paranoia of women, of sexuality, of, witchcraft from that time period was definitely the biggest part for me as well, within a closed family structure too, of distrust and how that erodes, but also definitely like a repression of women. We can see what that does to women from the mother figure and the daughter figures when they're not allowed to express themselves. They're either shipped off to a different family or they're blamed for witchcraft. Symbolism for how religious extremism can just corrode a family and an entire society.
In yeah, and in this movie, it's obviously it's religion, but I think any ideal that people are just blindly following when it's clearly not working, but they just keep going in and in and in on it.
Hmm.
You could see that. And yeah, I think what's interesting when you mention, the mother character, when you remove that nurturing element in any family, which is, I mean, especially in 1630, would have been sort of the role of the mother, you do see how important that is because when you don't have that love and it's replaced with accusations and finger pointing and fear, it's such a necessary part of any individual's purpose, but any family purpose. You need to have that nurturing and that sort of love and support. And that this family is just void of that.
Absolutely.
There's no, you have these two twins that are the youngest that are just spoiled, and an interesting choice with the casting. I feel this is a hard thing to praise, but they're like kind of chubbier kids, which I think is important because
Mm,
everyone's really skinny. So it kind of lets you know that like these kids are like eating a little bit more than
mm,
the rest of the family who's very gaunt and like, thin. I guess what I'm trying to say is that yeah, when you suppress the femininity in a family, when you suppress that sort of nurturing natural desire, it's just everything's going to fall apart.
it definitely felt like a comment on patriarchy in the family structure and how innate it is, and just through religion to this patriarchal structure that the mother has to abide to and be a servant to the father figure, and just the hypocrisy of those structures of how really the father brought them there and that's the reason why they're in this situation, but here we are blaming this young daughter when she is, or so we think, is innocent in the end, and even the mother turns against her own daughter when in reality it wasn't really her fault, and maybe it was those little kids or maybe it was the father figure, but it seemed like the boys died and that is what was tearing her up the most,
Sure, yeah.
and she was so ready to get rid of her daughter and fix the situation, which is sad.
I'm curious, Christina, 1 out of 10. What would you give the themes?
I would rate the themes of The Witch 8.5 out of 10.
8.5. I really appreciate the usages of the point fives. Not guests aren't always so comfortable breaking out the point fives. Christina, that's how I know you're a good
I'm
cinematographer.
thinking about it.
You'll yeah, you'll swap the lens if necessary. No, 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 no.
A
Let's
little more
a little
counts,
bit, yeah.
but not enough to get to
And
9.
We have a total here. Christina
Uh-oh.
rated The Witch. That's right. Buckle up. Grab your brooms. You gave the plot an 8, the characters and performances a 10, the visual storytelling a 9, the use of sound a 7.5, and the theme an 8.5 for a total of 86 out of 100. That's a pretty darn good grade. That's a solid
Woo!
A on the real talk spectrum. You can maybe give it an A minus, an A plus. It's your call. But you got to give it a letter grade.
An A minus. Not because there's anything I didn't like, but I feel like an A is top tier. And there's some elements that I wouldn't give it like a 10 out of 10. But overall, as a lover of horror and period pieces and Gothic drama pieces, especially magic, I would give it a solid A minus.
I think that's a great grade. And let's face it, this is Edgar's first direct.
Crazy.
Yeah, so like if you're getting an A minus your first time out of the gate, come on, Bobby Eggs, don't get
Absolutely.
too upset.
That's crazy for our first film. Destined to be a director.
And I believe, and people can keep me honest, I believe he is currently at the ripe age of maybe like a 43. So we reverse a decade ago. He's like 30, or he's 43 now in the year of our Lord, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, give or take a year or two, which means when he made this movie, he's like 33. So he's writing it probably when he's
That's
30. So yeah,
crazy.
phenomenal. I will
That's so
never
crazy.
reveal the age of myself. I am a timeless.
Me either.
But I mean, if anybody wants an Easter egg, Christina's score may actually be the year I was born. But that's besides the point. I should probably reveal my score now.
Yes, what's your score?
Before I give away my credit card information or something. I gave the plot to year 8. I gave it a 10. I'm a very kind lion. I'm a sucker for a movie that just keeps going until the end. And this is a movie where the last shot is sort of like the last part of the story. And I just really appreciate that. So I gave it a 10 out of 10. Characters and performances to year 10, I actually gave it a 9. I feel like the performances in this movie, 10 out of 10. The characters for me, it's not a knock. It's just that they're pretty straightforward. They're just in terms of being characters, they just kind of again, it's a folk tale. So it's a 9 out of 10 for me. Visual storytelling, I gave it a 9 to your 9, so no explanation needed there. Use of sound, I gave it an 8 to your 7.5.
Hey.
And the theme, I gave a 9 to your 8.5. So again, just a little bit off. So I gave it a 90
Solid.
overall to your 86. I gave it a solid A, but I do totally agree with what you said.
That's an excellent score. An A. What a kind lion you are.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, what a kind Christina you are, and what a kind cinematographer and friend and pal to come through the jungle. I know, like you said, you love horror movies. Can I put you on the spot? What's maybe another genre Christina loves? If we were going to have you back sometime, obviously this is what I'm fishing for. I got to know what I can offer you.
In addition to horror and Gothic horror, I also love fantasy films.
Oh, okay.
So I will always be up for anything that's magical. And I also love period pieces.
Period pieces, magic, and fantasy. I love it. All right, well, we definitely got some of those coming up. So keep an eye on the phone. It'll be ringing.
All right. This has been a fun adventure with you, Al. I'll come to the jungle anytime.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here. And we do have links to your website in the description so people can check out all of Christina's work. It's amazing. If you're one of the few people on TikTok who aren't following Christina, figure it out because she's got an amazing
Thank you
account.
so much.
You not only get to see her work, but what I love about you is you're one of the few cinematographers who really does kind of bring people into your process. And so if you're trying to learn, if you're in the business, if you're just interested about the business, you really are like one of the best follows out there because you get the whole experience. So I'm not just saying that, I mean it. Everything again is linked in our description. So please support Christina because she's the best.
Thanks, Al. I appreciate it.
Platinum Plastic isn't just a proud sponsor of Real Talk, they're also the home for all our new designs and merchandise. Follow Platinum Plastic on Redbubble to see all our A+ gear. That's Platinum Plastic on Redbubble for all your Real Talk merch.
All storytelling is a manipulation of context from the author to the audience, and in cinema, the filmmaker has more tools at their disposal than perhaps any creators in any other medium. So let's dissect how The Lighthouse is a textbook example of cinematography, because the only consistent context the film truly offers is light. The visuals in the picture collectively curate a perfect expression of madness, and does so through a completely unique and equally authentic lens, or vintage 1930 Bolter lenses more specifically. The 35mm double 52-22 film stock contained inside this 1.19:1 aspect ratio is more than a choice, it's a recreation of process that is completely appropriate for the time the film is set in. I'm not sure if there's one frame of this picture that doesn't feel like an incredibly purposeful attempt to harmonize what is versus what could be, and is at all times extracting emotion without giving the audience anything familiar to cling to. And in doing so delivers more than just story, the film itself is an experience. Don't be fooled, there are a lot more than two characters in this story, and at various points in the film you might start to wonder if the main characters are even two separate people at all. Now's the time for Gab and Chatter, and I hear it's good luck to review a movie with a seabird, and I see a toucan named Jimmy, so that'll have to do. Jimmy, I'll resist the urge to ask you what you'd do with a steak if you had one. So will you answer me this? Have ye ever sparred with a gull?
I have not. I've never. No, I'm a jungle bird, so I stay away from the seabirds.
We talked about this off air. Does Al reveal his true love for this film? And I've decided just to be completely transparent. I love this movie, so everybody can take my review with a grain of salt. Jimmy, I don't know, tell me a little bit about your relationship with The Lighthouse.
I'm so glad that you like this movie because I really like this movie. Jimmy flew down to Florida Picture House called the Tampa Theater and saw this film on its premiere night and was absolutely floored by this thing. And to floor a bird, it takes a lot.
Not a sponsor whatsoever of the show, but if anyone finds themselves in Tampa, Florida at any point, check out the Tampa Theater because it is a phenomenal venue, and I can't imagine how amazing it would have been to see this.
Yeah. Well, to connect those thoughts, I feel like seeing this movie, especially again recently, to talk to you about it, I really feel like it has this universal horror film kind of feel to it, like an old like Dracula picture or an old Frankenstein. And other than being able to recognize Robert Pattinson, not so much Willem Dafoe. And this movie, which is this kind of story, is called a two-hander, and it's basically a story that has two characters in it, a story that takes place with two characters. These people that are presented to us are dangerous guys. I don't think that they're good guys. And we do follow around and root for Robert Pattinson's character. I think that this movie really is about this sort of ultimate descent into madness. And it's this plot that starts out with, with a bit of innocence. It's a master and his boy. I captain, you do what I say, I tend to light. And it is a very unforgiving terrain. You can smell the smells of this movie, and it is dank and salty and farty, and it is a gross place. And I think that this is a story about a descent into madness. What do I think this movie's about? And when we talk about some of the themes of this thing, I look for evidence from what is presented to me, specifically in a two-hander, about what these guys do to each other and what they say to each other. Right before there's a big blow up between them, there has been a storm. It's in the later part of the movie, and Willem Dafoe's pirate looks at him and says, "You're so mad you don't know up from down. How long have we been on this rock? 5 weeks? 2 days? Where are we?" Help me to recollect who you are again. Tommy, I'm probably a figment of your imagination. This rock is a figment of your imagination, too. You're probably wandering through a grove of tag elders up in north of Canada, Canada. Frostbitten maniac talking to yourself, knee-deep in snow. And this is, to me, a total connection to Charles Dickens and the Christmas Carol. There's a part where Ebenezer Scrooge says to himself when he initially sees Jacob Marley's ghost, he says, "You may be a bit of undigested bit of beef, a blob of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an undone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are." And he's dismissing this vision by attributing it to some sort of like stomach ailment or sick, like he's hallucinating. And this movie is very hallucinatory. This could also be a dark fantasy that is a symbol of the afterlife or a symbol of, limbo. It's not necessarily what I saw happening, but I did very much enjoy that.
You're hitting the nail on the head when you talk about limbo in terms of what the status of this is. I mean, when looking at this story, it seems, especially towards the end of the film, it's very reflective of the myth of Prometheus. And so and there's other similar myths that draw upon, struggle in sort of trying to raise up or go up something vertical, which is why I'm trying to sort of connect it to the lighthouse and sort of rise up to something, and how that can kind of consume you, or you can be consumed. And, you mentioned also, I just want to make sure I respond. This is maybe the gassiest hour and 49 minutes of cinema that does not have Jack Black in the cast that you'll ever see. I just kind of look at it at all times as this real accurate portrait of madness. And you talking about the unreliable narrator, and that to me is the sort of consistent thread that reminds me this is a tale of madness. You are meant to, at any point when you feel like you have something figured out or understood, you will then turn around and question that.
Yes.
And not because you were given manipulated information, but because you will be given information that completely contradicts something you were given earlier. And that's beautifully mirrored in the black and white storytelling, because everything is just one or the other, flipping back and forth. In my opinion, very masterfully done, because there's not a second of the film that isn't in some way reflecting a aspect of, again, the human condition of madness, and what that is like, and the way it escalates is kind of incredible. So I digress. Jimmy, what would you give the plot 1 out of 10 for?
I thought a lot about this, Al, and this movie loses a little bit of weight with me only because I don't actually know what the heck is going on. So Jimmy gives it a 9.
Locking in the 9. And look, hey, Jimmy, that's totally fair. This is not me defending the film, but I do think what you're describing is the desired intention by the filmmaker. I think you could watch this movie 100 times, and if you walked away saying, "Oh, I know what it's about," then you definitely don't. Because I think the whole point is you could have 100 different variations. The film draws upon so many known images, and we'll talk about that more in visual storytelling, but there's just such a consciousness that this film draws upon, while also leaning on very specific technical decisions that make it something that doesn't exist these days. And it's just, oh man, on every level, it's got everything going on. So the 9 is locked in.
Yeah, I do. Since we're talking about plot, I do want to call attention to the writing of this story. Okay. And it's interesting that this one was something that the director, Robert Eggers, and his brother wrote together, which I thought was fascinating. And they wanted to do this, but then got money for the Witch, which is also uh, a tale of fantasy and darkness. They're very dark movies in their morality and in their tone, and in their spirituality. They're very dark.
And they're so authentically written because each piece draws from something very real. And in this movie, the dialogue was inspired by journals written by sailors at the time and different logs from, again, the lighthouse keepers and various things. So there is a very authentic,
True to the times. Yeah, true.
yeah, a dialect or just a language that is so unique, and it feels like just a time capsule. But that being said, we're talking about performances when I say that, or at least mentioned from the script, characters and performances. I've got a little bit of a game I want to play with you, Jimmy. But before we get into that, yeah, Jimmy loves a game. Jimmy loves the games. Jimmy loves a lighthouse. Give me your thoughts on Willem Dafoe and his performance and his character Thomas Wake. There's two Thomases in this movie for the sake of the discussion, so we're not confused. Willem Dafoe will refer to as Wake, and then of course you have Howard, who is Robert Pattinson's character. So what do you think of Wake performed by Willem Dafoe?
This actor melting so disgustingly into this salty dog. I swear to you, I forget that it's him. I forgot that it was him. I think he's so despicable. I think he's disgusting. I think his teeth and his beard, and he spits and he farts, and he's so mean and just the saltiest dog. There are pirate stories of old, all kind of coalesce in this character. So this character is also quite mysterious and hiding a secret. And, he locks all the doors all the time. He locks everything up. And, he gets very defensive about the light. There's darkness behind this guy. There's a really, really fun part. It's kind of heartbreaking. He's like, "What do you mean you don't like my cooking? I did really good lobster, and that removes to me all of that like despicable stuff about like the repulsive stuff about him. And I just thought that was so wonderful.
Very much a duality with him, a white and black. There's this kind of worker, foreman, drill sergeant side of him, which I would submit is the sober side of him. And then there's the post-dinner drunken side of him.
Oh, yeah.
Which is hyper emotional. And this is, of course, just for context, post-dinner, this is when his shift is, and he goes and he mines the light. So there's also this connection to him being drunk and going up, and we see him, he's often naked with the light, completely stripped down. So he's just all in. And when you talk about him being very kind of sensitive and you don't like me cooking. Yeah.
I love that.
I know. But he is wasted at that point. So I just want to bring up that connection between those two states.
They party so hard that they resort to drinking the kerosene that I think runs the motor of the lighthouse. And he's like, at first he just like dips like honey into it, like that's gonna do anything. Okay, like these guys party so hard, and it is incredible.
Thomas Howard, Robert Pattinson's character, when he begins the film, he is sober. He says as much. He doesn't drink. And once there's a storm that hits and they pull up this sort of reserve of alcohol that they have, and he begins drinking. And that descent from that point, which, there's just this reserve of rum or something that they're drinking, down to him literally towards the end of the film taking swigs from the gas can or the oil can. Yeah, you're just like, holy moly.
Well, there are drunks that like release their monster. They release their demon because of the drink. They do have like tender moments where they like dance and hug and like party and stuff. And then they scream at each other and,
fight.
They fight, That is a key indicator for me that like things are going wrong. And let's make this very clear. The storm, as evidenced in the mythology, the storm that he speaks of he warns of and foreshadows in the beginning. I mean, Defoe's character, the storm is caused by Robert Pattinson violently murdering a seagull, and he smashes that thing, and it is so awful. And what happens immediately, he's like, the wind has changed.
And I knew obviously that was going to be difficult for you to watch, Jimmy. I appreciate that. It's difficult for me to watch the end of the first act of The Lion King, and that's a cartoon. So yeah, to watch, a bird of a feather, so to speak, get just obliterated.
Smashed.
I mean, yeah,
Just
like
smashed.
it looks like he's trying to kill a roach on that rock that he can't hit with a seagull. I mean, it is intense. By the way, shout out, that is Sully the Seagull, who is also co-starred with Blake Lively in The Shallows. So believe it or not, that seagull has an IMDb page and has worked with. Sully probably has a SAG card. Let's call it as we see it. So shout out to Sully the Seagull.
Yeah.
Jimmy, that brings us to our game. I did mention, whenever we have something that's a little bit heavy, I like to try to lighten it up. I like to try to bring in a game. So I figured this would be the perfect time to do so. So the game is called Who is Thomas Winslow Howard? Winslow is in quotes. That'll make sense in a second. So Jimmy, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tee you up. I'm going to let the audience know, anybody listening, some things that we definitively know about Thomas.
Yeah.
Based on the plot. And you can maybe tell me who you think Thomas is and how he kind of got to this place.
Yeah.
All right. So he is a former lumberman, not a true wiki or lighthouse keeper. He claims at the beginning of the film to be, calls himself Winslow or Ephraim Winslow?
Yes.
Which is not really his name. This was the name of his former partner or foreman that he worked for in the lumberyard. He's running from guilt and possibly running from himself. This is something else we know. He's isolated, resentful, and desperate for validation. We also know his sanity is unstable, to say the least, and he deteriorates throughout the film. We know he is, of course, drawn to the forbidden light. And finally, the last thing we know is that his fate mirrors mythological punishment. So with that profile, Detective Jimmy, tell me, who is Thomas Howard?
Al, based on the information that you've just given me, let me supply a little bit more, and I'm going to tell you who I think he is. There's a part where he drunkenly spills the beans. He spills why'd you spill your beans? And he tells a story about at first admitting that his name is not Ephraim. He has taken that name from what I took was his friend who was working on the logs together. Ephraim was his friend, and Ephraim slipped, and he watched his friend die. And in order to escape, now, this is a supposition, that in order to escape who he was, he takes over Ephraim's identity and runs away and gets the first job that will take him as far away from those, what are they called? They're these tag elder trees in northern Canada. Okay. I think that this is a kid who probably, based on evidence presented in the film, I think this is a kid who had a very disagreeable experience with his father, and he is, like you said, is guilt-ridden and runs away from his problems, tries to run away from his identity to assume this new one, and then be this like hard-working boy, out on the rock.
Not to be confused with the Michael Bay picture, The Rock.
Ooh, we should do that one.
Yeah, you know what? If I ever review The Rock, I'm gonna try to get Dwayne Johnson to be the guest reviewer. So don't take that personally, Jimmy. If I book Dwayne.
He's really good in the Smashing Machine, folks.
Wow, look at this. We've got the Smashing Machine plug. I love it.
There it is. There
Well,
it
Jimmy, I appreciate that. I think that's a great answer. I'm going to give, not all games do I play as well, but I'm going to play this game as well.
Okay.
This is, of course, one of my favorite films. I've seen it a few times, and I have a similar takeaway that you do, but just a bit different. There is a character or an actor that we see throughout the film who has sort of bleach blonde hair and bleach blonde eyebrows. I definitely interpreted that as Efren, that for that to be his partner. What's interesting about it is the juxtaposition of the images with him are always very sexual. There, for example, when Thomas is having a physical relationship with the mermaid, it's very much intercut with that character, that actor. That actor at one point is sort of punching, and then the hands turn into the female hands, which transitions down into the female. And so there is this very specific juxtaposition of sexuality, sexual repression, and how and when he sees these things. So, for example, when we see the interaction with the mermaid, this is inspired by a sort of trinket that Thomas finds in the bed. So again, this isn't necessarily a fantasy he has. This is something that's inspired by a physical item that he has found. And so when he uses this as a source of pleasure, it's as though his subconscious is intruding with these images of Efren, of Winslow. I took that to very much be a reflection of sort of a homosexual relationship between the two characters, and perhaps the repression of that. Again, in so much of the relationship with Willem Dafoe in these close quarters, I assume is mirroring the relationship they would have had. And I think that the vulnerability that Thomas Howard potentially shared with Efren resulted in him potentially murdering or killing that person, using the accident as a reason to sort of cover up the murder, and then assuming his identity because he loved the man.
You think he killed him and loved him at the same time?
I think he was in love with him. I think that because of the time period, I think he is not able to come to grips with that. And look at again the madness that we see him sort of display throughout the film. It's always sort of connected with emotion in this sense of power and control and identity. And when he initially goes, and as long as he's sober, he's sort of okay to work and grunt out and grind. But when the storm hits and he gets a little bit of that liquid courage, it all falls apart. And I think the real him, the sort of truth, comes out in the same way with Willem Dafoe. Like I mentioned earlier, when he has that medicine, that drink, he doesn't become stupid, which is what the sober Robert Pattinson would submit. He becomes truthful. And for Willem Dafoe, he becomes submissive. You didn't like me cooking, which is this submissive opposite of this overbearing, like, I'm the boss, do what I say. And when you have this sober Robert Pattinson who's going to carry a log up a hill no matter how many times it falls, when he starts drinking, it's the exact opposite. I mean, at one point he's got the guy on a leash, it's like, this is the truth. And I think the sober Robert Pattinson is labeling the truth as stupid at the beginning. And so, yeah, that is call it what you want, a fan theory, a lion theory. I think that Thomas Wake fell in love with Efren Wilson, killed him, and went on the lam and assumed his name because he was in love with him. And I think that guilt is what consumes him. And when we see him try to escape into pleasure, this is when the subconscious will not allow him to escape. And so the light, in many ways, I do feel like is just sort of a symbolic reflection of the truth, which is why I think at the end, when he is literally consumed by the truth, it results in his immediate death, a quite literal downward spiral. Very few times do we see a literal downward spiral. So I said, again, I will digress, but that's kind of who I think Thomas Howard is. And
I am totally convinced. I'm convinced with this. We have enough evidence to make this very, very believable, and it's a really astute point. Wow. I want to. I like your reference to this downward spiral at the end. Although Jimmy's a bird, his greatest fear is falling down the stairs backwards, and he falls all the way down that entire corkscrew upstairs.
it's one shot. Oh, whoever that's done.
Beautiful. It's beautiful. And the final shot, let me give you my grade. I think it's obvious at this point that I give the characters and performances an absolute 10.
Shout out to
Just
Sully.
Unbeatable. And funny thing is, I guess in the beginning there was a lot of contention about the casting for it. Both actors were presented with this and sort of hemmed and hawed, but wanted to work with each other, which I think is, could you recast this?
There's a part of me that says maybe what would a Jim Carrey do with something like that with and Robert Eggers, could that be a total flop, or is there something in there? But yeah, Willem Dafoe is just the fact that he is able to paint in so many shades of crazy, because there is a distinct character in this film in Thomas Wake that so you said it earlier, you lose yourself while you're watching it. You forget that you're watching Willem Dafoe.
Yeah.
It's the same thing when you watch this may sound cheesy, but like him as like a Green Goblin or something. But it's another just form of crazy, but it's like palatable popcorn crazy. But he truly does like build a character inside of that, and it's almost Jack Nicholson-esque. We're lucky that we have filmmakers that really give them the ability, or not the ability, but give them the platform and the space to just...
In episode 3, you have a discussion with the brilliant Neil Flanagan about the Shawshank Redemption, and he brings up the fact that there was at some point a chance for Tim Robbins was going to play Forrest Gump and Tom Hanks was going to play in Shawshank Redemption. That's understandable. It's a hilarious moment in that episode. That would be a thing that would be acceptable. I don't know if I could accept any other actors in this particular story.
Well, I don't know. If you say that, and now I'm thinking of Tom Hanks in Castaway, and maybe him being the Willem Dafoe.
I'm becoming a fan, Al. Episode 10 with WH and Sid are so funny. Domo Smith, who is an incredible filmmaker, and to hear him talk about filmmaking technique and his attitude towards the art is just so enlightening. Lila's my favorite cast member.
Oh, well, look, it's hard to argue with that. Shout out to Lila. Shout out to Domo, who's a dear friend. He was actually, Jimmy, I don't know if you've heard it yet. He was just on the last episode where we talked Jordan Peele. He and I have maybe one of the best discussions of the season talking about Get Out. And he will be back in the future. We're going to talk about 8 Mile. And by the way, you didn't mention Sid. I'm going to shout out Sid right now because this year for Al's birthday, Sid gave me a very lovely gift, which is a bound copy of the Lighthouse script from A24, and it has some really beautiful artwork in the back that kind of breaks down the light and the lamp and everything. So if we're shouting out our favorite members of the show, I just got to give some love to Sid there. Jimmy, talking about visual storytelling, I mentioned in my open, of course, how unique this film is. It was shot using lenses from the 1930s. The film stock is from the time. Everything is so expertly and precisely crafted to bring an authenticity to this. And I just love that inspired level of approach to the cinematography. So I'll start there because I don't know, how can I not mention that? But your thoughts?
I did mention that it felt like a like a Dracula, Frankenstein, like universal horror kind of movie. There are so many instances of pure intention with what the camera is capturing. And that makes it such a compelling series of images that we are presented, just floored by how paintings are used as inspiration. I love it when I love it when artists reference other works. There's a direct reference to Sasha Schneider's
Yes.
painting called Hypnosis from 1904. And it is this beam of light that is being emitted from one person's face onto the other crouched in front of them. And it is so cool. And it is such a like faithful representation, a representation of that particular painting. I love that so much. Also, that final shot is very much a Prometheus shot, from the myth of Prometheus, the seagulls pecking his guts out. There are so many moments and look, what's so great is this movie's not totally darkness the whole time. There are like funny and uplifting moments. There are great moments. The black and white chiaroscuro, there's beautiful, beautiful lighting in this thing. There are these exteriors that are so grungy. When he's pushing the wheelbarrow, when he's got the two shit buckets, the beached mermaid, it confronts him. There's a part where Robert Pattinson is outside and he is having this argument with a seagull. He throws a rock at it. It flies away, and then he turns and looks behind him up at the lighthouse and sees the man watching him. And the look on his face is just such pure paranoia.
There's all these seagulls flying around the lighthouse too. He looks up. That's the other component to it, because you sort of follow the bird up, and they're all, because you hear him the whole time, and then you look up and he's being watched.
The thing that really stands out to me is there are shots that are fantasy shots, mostly revolving around the mermaids and the dreams that he has, and like that little talisman that he has. There are just so many beautiful capturings of these like such ugly things. It is so lush.
I totally agree with you. What the black and white photography ends up doing so well is it kind of forces depth. Almost, again, like a painter or an illustrator has to figure out in the frame, because you just lose things to white and black. So you have to frame things up and block things and light things in such a particular way that you end up really maximizing the depth within your picture. Rather, you're just in a small, tight quarters with two guys sitting opposite each other on the bed talking in silhouette, or if you're down and you're getting up and you're next to the beach and you look up and 100 yards away someone's peering down at you from a lighthouse. This is a masterclass in black and white photography and in how to, again, capture depth with that. Jimmy, what do you give it 1 out of 10 visual storytelling?
Oh, I think Jimmy gives it a 10.
So there's only one answer to that question. But that brings us to use of sound. Eraserhead is a great David Lynch picture that is sort of visually iconic, tonally iconic. I just jogged my memory thinking about the music in the film. But you mentioned earlier some of the classic horror movies that this picture, it's very much, if you took Dracula and Eraserhead and kind of put it in a blender, you get something similar to that. So I didn't mention Eraserhead in visual storytelling, and I feel like I kind of have to, but I'm going to parlay it into talking about sound, because this has a very Eraserhead kind of drone-like sound. Yeah,
it does. And there is score work that is so beautiful and fitting in this sort of haunting, dark mood of this There's a sound, and it's a repeating sound. It's kind of like a foghorn. And I swear I've made that sound blowing my nose before, okay? But is this a diegetic sound? Is this a non-diegetic sound? What is the purpose of this sound? Is it real? Do they sometimes it maybe looks like they respond to it.
Yeah, I know the moment you're talking about. Yeah.
What is that?
So in keeping honest, in case I get lost in my sauce here, great cinema is always obviously evolving. And I think that mythology and storytelling over thousands of years evolves in a way where we start to see the threads that make up the story, and we're always kind of retelling the same stories, but we're redefining the threads. And what I think we're seeing in a movie like The Lighthouse is a contemporary John Williams's Jaws sound, because it is practical. I do think that the sound stems from a practical real world environment. And I do think it is very much at times overlayered with the characters experiencing certain emotions or feelings or pain. So we associate it specifically with pain. But I do think it is sort of a foghorn. It's a warning of something coming, just like the Jaws music is a warning of the shark. But the Jaws music is a traditional score. It's not meant to be something the characters hear, and we're not meant to think it is. But in this world that Eggers creates that's so immersive, we're experiencing what the characters are experiencing. So I think his use of sound in the score has to be something we wonder if at times the characters are actually interacting with. So, and then that can only happen if the sound stems from something in the world. So that's how I see it, as this sort of evolved version of what classic horror scores do.
I think what separates this movie from the pictures of the past is that the sound is so perfect. Which is why...
Wait, I have to ask you specifically, how many farts out of 10 do you give it?
Jimmy gives it 10.
Oh boy, set the stopwatch. We'll go another hour here talking about theme alone. I do feel like this is the most appropriate time for me to just kind of commit blasphemy for my own efforts, which is just sort of read through some notes here. I really don't like doing this. I always pride myself on being able to be here for the listeners, but there's just so much here that I'm going to just kind of shoot through this, and then Jimmy, I'm going to let you respond.
Okay.
I think this is, again, all under the guise of theme. We talked about earlier about the myth and the myth of Prometheus, just so people understand sort of the core parallels here. Prometheus stole fire from the gods and was punished by being chained to a rock while an eagle ate his liver daily. So again, this is a very core connection to the end. In the film, the light is equal to this sort of forbidden knowledge or divine fire. Thomas Howard is reaching for the light and suffering punishment. His body is again eaten by gulls, which mirrors the Prometheus. And the themes of curiosity and defiance are the things that obviously come to light in the end, and no pun definitely intended. We then have Proteus, if I'm saying that right, god of the sea. Proteus was this shape-shifting sea god who could tell the future, but avoided doing so by constantly changing form. In the film, obviously, Thomas Wake, or the Defoe character, sort of embodies this character. You again can take that to mean sort of a literal interpretation of this myth, or again, just at times just sort of symbolic representations of it. We have the sirens that we talked about in the myth. Sirens lure sailors to their deaths with songs and beauty. Again, I mentioned earlier how I constantly see these sirens being juxtaposed with images of Thomas's logging partner, wink, wink, if you want to call it that. You know, the film uses mermaids to haunt Howard and obviously represent temptation, guilt, and sexual repression. Icarus imagery I've made a note of. Beyond Prometheus, the final Ascent to the light recalls Icarus, who fell too close to the sun who flew too close to the sun and fell. The imagery of the light and blindness, Howard being consumed by it, echoes both Icarus's fall and divine retribution or hubris. Finally, we also have some Christian folklore in here that's echoed, but the storm that traps them is sort of a reflection of the Old Testament punishment, a flood or divine wrath. The seagulls are believed to carry the souls of the dead sailors, which is tied into sort of maritime superstition. Wake speeches have the cadence of biblical curses and sea chanty myth, which blur religion and folklore. So again, that's kind of my overall summary of sort of the themes, the myths that are present in this movie. Again, my apologies if that wasn't as sexy as it should have been, but I kind of just separated in my notes everything into literal black and white, where I put themes of ignorance, struggle, guilt, deception, and isolation into the black theme pile. And then there's sort of the white theme pile, which is light, power, knowledge, companionship, hell, even seagulls if you want.
Well, I think you paint some layers of narrative storytelling and theme that's intertwined. I wish I would have had a black pile and a white pile. If you really think about what this is truly about, in between these two men are two critical things. There is trust and there is secrets. And that's not lies. It's just secrets. And both of these men combat each other in light of both of those things. When the nature of their reality spins out of control, so does our understanding of who these guys are to each other. There are several moments where we will be presented some actions, and Willem Dafoe always tends to rewrite and gaslight his partner in these really strange ways. Their secrets overtake that trust.
It does come down to perception and context. And when you don't have trust, you don't have context, and there's nothing more maddening than that. And that's what I feel like this film, again, is a portrait of. It's a portrait of madness.
Because it wasn't completely presented to me and it is only up to my interpretation, it loses a little steam with me. If you want to know,
I'd love to.
You asked, Jimmy gives the theme an 8.
The 8. And just to clarify, you're saying because the themes are open-ended or maybe a little more ambiguous, if I'm hearing you correctly, and you're saying you would have scored higher for you had that maybe been a little more focused.
That's part of it.
Okay.
Of all of the layers of theme that you presented us, it does seem almost frustratingly elusive and like confusing.
For the rest of time, I know what Jimmy on this day graded the Lighthouse. I'm going to read it back to you, Jimbo.
Okay.
You gave the plot out of 10, you gave it a 9. Characters and performances a 10. Visual storytelling a 10. Use of sound a 10. And theme, you gave it an 8 for a 94 out of 100. So the question is, Jimmy, A or A plus?
It's an A plus movie. It is very much an A plus movie.
Get the confetti guns ready. To your 9, I gave the plot a 10. I think this plot is phenomenal. I often say on the show, I love a movie where it just keeps unraveling until the very end. This movie definitely achieves that. And as many times as I've watched it, as many times as I'll continue to watch it and rewatch it, I'm always finding new bits to the plot. So it got a 10. Characters and performances, I gave it a 10 to your 10. Visual storytelling, I gave it a 10 to your 10. Use of sound, I gave it a 10 to your 10. So the question is, what did I give the themes? And we all know Al's rule. For a movie to get a 10 out of 10 in theme, it has to itself be an example of the themes that it's exploring. And I don't know if it's the shot of Willem Dafoe delivering a monologue while dirt is just being thrown on his face, reading it. I don't know if it's just the core idea of somebody saying, hey, my brother and I read a bunch of sailors' journals and we wrote this crazy movie and they were given $11 million to make it. But I do think in every way, shape, or form, this is as authentic a cinematic portrait of madness one can get. So I did give it a 10 in theme, which means I gave The Lighthouse a 100 out of 100. And I will defend it quickly by saying, if you think, oh my gosh, Al has for the first time in the history of the show given a movie a perfect grade.
Yeah.
How can that be? I didn't like that movie. Let me make it clear. A perfect movie is not a movie that everyone likes. A perfect movie, because for something to be perfect in every way, it almost by definition has to start out wanting to achieve something that no one else is trying to do, if that makes any sense at all. I'm very comfortable saying I think this is a perfect film. Does not mean I think that it's for everyone, but I do think this movie checks off every box a movie can check off. I think it more than checks off what everybody involved was probably trying to achieve, and by doing so becomes a true masterclass. I think it's a masterclass in use of sound. I think it's a masterclass in characters and performances, how you write a script. I totally agree with you, Jimmy, that in terms of theme, in terms of plot, I absolutely see where you're coming from. But from my point of view and what I look for in a cinematic experience, this movie delivers exactly what I'm looking for. So for better or worse, moving forward, people now know what a 10 out of 10 in Al's book is.
I'm so glad we've got a perfect score out of you, Al. I want to call attention to one of my favorite parts. Willem Dafoe gives this single take, long speech that is a curse upon Robert Pattinson's character. It's such a great moment, and it is immortalized in the RSP signature series, the art print that can be found on Platinum Plastic on Redbubble.
Jimmy, I thank you so much. I was over here getting ready to bring that up, and you beat me to the punch. But yeah, it's a great piece, and it is one of, I think, currently 4, maybe 5 pieces in our signature series. The signature, of course, being from Mr. Robert Pearson himself, which everybody should go check out. You can get it on a poster, you can get it on a t-shirt. You get on a postcard and just mail it to somebody. Mail them a random Willem Dafoe face. But Jimmy, thank you so much for flying in today, being on the Robert Eggers episode, hawking some Robert Pearson merch, and of course, giving a great film an A+. With all that being said, then Jimmy, I've only got one more thing to tell you, and that is, all right then, I like your cooking.
Before we jump into the next review, I just wanted to thank you for listening this far, and I ask that you leave a like if you're enjoying the show. And let us know what movies you'd like to hear us score on Real Talk. We're almost certainly on your favorite social media platform, so search Al the Movie Lion wherever you scroll.
The following review is powered by the provocative and twisted mind of author Joe Belcastro. Dive into his imagination at joebelcastro.com.
Each year, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences nominates a handful of adapted screenplays to be acknowledged. And typically, the source material are novels, short stories, and films, but rarely do we see a 90-minute German expressionistic piece from 1922 adapted into a modern fairy tale about the selfishness of love. This is the 4th feature film from 41-year-old writer-director Robert Eggers. In just shy of a decade, it evolves his sensibilities for a more mainstream audience. All the production departments align their respective crafts perfectly to create a period horror that's so real you'll never look at a pigeon the same way again. Although the plot does contain a few tropes that might have some cynical viewers rolling their eyes, the story is clearly told with an inspired passion that permeates in every frame. Seeing Nosferatu for this review was my 4th time seeing the film, and even still I found new details lurking in the wardrobe, locations, and performances. I'm not sure I could have a better guest to help me score this one than our dear friend, horror novelist and former film critic, Joe Belcastro. Welcome back to the jungle, Joe. Now we are neighbors.
All right, Al, is that your German?
It's by Nosferatu.
That's Nosferatu.
That was, look, I howled when he said, "We'll be neighbors." I thought that was so funny. I know I was not supposed to. I love this movie, but I really thought it was funny when he said,
Yeah, I mean, the movie's great. And thank you for the introduction. I'm happy to do this one. I was looking forward to it when you asked me, and I was like, yes, I will come back for, I think this is my third time. I admit I might be gushing. I guess that's a spoiler where this is going to go.
Well, look, there's a reason I had you on here, man, because you're totally the perfect guest to have back on the show. This, of course, as I mentioned in my open, is a retelling of the very famous German expressionistic film, maybe the most famous German expressionistic film. Take that, Adolfship Potemkin. Take that, Das Boot. That's right. I came correct. Anyhow, let us know in the comments your favorite German expressionistic film. Great time to be alive.
Al, come on. Pull it in, Al. Pull it in.
Thank you. So I'm curious, Joe, when we look at the plot of this film and we appreciate where it came from, what are your thoughts on it?
This is a beautiful horror story. And yes, it does retread on some classic vampire Dracula lore. Like, there's Bram Stoker all over this. And obviously it's a remake of the original 1920s. All that being said, I don't really care. I never put the distinction on anything like, oh, it's a remake. Like, I never tell anybody that. I'm like, just go see the movie. And again, this is coming from a guy who's so familiar with vampire lore and all that stuff. And I loved it. I was still invested for whatever reason. I don't go into something like, say, hey, I want to love this. I didn't care. Like, all right, I've seen this scene before, in a matter of speaking, in terms of the context, not so much how they shot it.
Of course.
But I was like, whatever. This is new performers. It's shot differently, and that's getting away from the plot a little bit, but that added to the delivery of it. And I just can't think of a better, unique horror story in the last few years. This plot's not going to unfold so quick. You're going to have to get spoon-fed a little bit, and we're going to take you on a little ride. Marketing materials might suggest, hey, it's this or that because it's a vampire, it's creepy, it's a creature more, not so much like a human vampire.
Right.
But you just kind of fall into it and you take the ride, and the story is just told so well, not just from the characters' voices, but from the way they shot it, as I mentioned, from the structures, the production design is gorgeous. And everything tells a story. Usually when you say a plot, like, hey, what's this about, right? No, this is about a journey into evil and love. What do genuine good people do about it? But, like, there's the other aspects of, like, here's your surroundings and, like, how you have to adapt adds to the story.
It's so authentic. I mean, it's just as much about the plague. It's just about this environment that you're in. And when you talk about, how familiar some of the plot is to other, vampire stories. By the way, Bram Stoker accredited as one of the writers on this. So it is definitely aware of what it is, but it's still doing it not only in a way that you've never really seen before, but somehow in the most grounded, realistic way, which you'd think, if I said you're going to see a vampire movie like you've never seen before, I don't know what would come to mind, but it's just such an incredibly rich and authentic visual experience the entire time. And yeah, honestly, there's not a ton to unpack when it comes to the plot, because this is a very straightforward telling of your classic Dracula story. Perhaps worth mentioning for those unfamiliar with Nosferatu, Nosferatu was a German film, as we mentioned earlier, was based on Dracula, and was one of the first real sort of incidences of a film getting sued by a creator for rights, because they did not have the permission from the Stoker estate to create it. But the lore of this entire character and sort of franchise, if you will, was only enhanced by this film. Joe, what would you give it?
The plot score, just because it does pull from a lot of things already, I mean, it's an 8 at best.
Yeah, I think that's really fair. I struggle with that because I really enjoyed it, but at the same time, like I said, it's, what do you do? What do you do when you're taking something that's already been done? How do you give it extra points for kind of doing the same thing? You can give it style points, which is what we're going to do when we talk about characters and performances. Holy cow, this movie has got some characters and performances in it. Let's just start with the title character, Nosferatu. The Skarsgård, really, we see every inch of this guy.
Yes, every 7 inch of this guy. Skarsgård, look, for those that don't know who he is, there's a lot of Skarsgårds actually.
I once identified the fact based on Robert Edgar's other picture, The Norseman, that Robert Eggers might have a Skarsgård on.
Well done. Well done. There's a golf clap going on right now in the jungle.
And I'll let you get back to your point now.
But Bill Skarsgård, he's kind of found a nice little niche of playing some great characters. A lot of them been horror, actually. Like he was Pennywise in the recent It, Stephen King's adaptation. He was also in something not so phenomenal. They did well in it, the Crow remake, which is I could do a whole episode by myself about slamming that movie, but we won't get there. Anyway, he's fantastic, and the reason why I love this movie so much is because he's a perfect choice to be like, hey, we're doing something that's been done essentially officially 2 or 3 times, but overall any vampire movie is always pulling some type of Dracula thing, right? So he's like, all right, how do I make this different? He does it, right? He is that voice he did. It might annoy people in the beginning until you get used to it. It adds so much, and it fits with the character arc. I mean, if there's ever an iconic role, I mean, since maybe, if you're sticking in this genre, right? Like, who is the all-time, like, Christopher Lee, in that round? Like, Skarsgård is going to eventually have that notation next to his name, like, but it's going to take some time because, like, this movie was well received, but I think a lot of people don't really appreciate it because they were, sometimes the horror genre has trouble branching out.
I mean, this was a Christmas release. This was released on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
I think a lot easier for people to miss. I mean, Robert Eggers as a filmmaker has definitely found his fan base. This Lion is a firm member of that fan base. This was easily his biggest picture, so I don't know as a director how much he would have brought to it. Lily Rose Depp, pretty early in her career. Bill Skarsgård, again, a star, but not the type of A-lister. And in 2025, we've seen, Aaron Taylor Johnson transition into a leading man, not necessarily leading man in movies that are pulling in huge audiences. But yeah, this cast, again, in 2024, it's a phenomenal cast, but it isn't one, especially in the leads, that I think we're gonna find an audience right out of the gate. But I agree, I think it's only gonna build over time because there's so much quality here. This is a actual corpse of a count who is somehow having dinner with you. I mean, this is, again, it's just done in a way that I genuinely, to build on your point, I don't think it can be undone. He is now the definitive vampire Dracula Nosferatu, whatever you want to call it.
Yep. And look, this is an ensemble cast personified. Great point. Like, none of these people are going to move a movie by themselves. You can't say like, hey, Tom Cruise in the movie. Okay, it works. Meryl Streep back in the day. Yep, it works. But this team of characters and then this cast that brought them to life. Lily Rose Depp, who's Johnny Depp's daughter, she is a whole other level. Who knew that she had this in her? And I say that because I think she's done some other things in terms of she might be on a popular HBO Max show or something like that. This is my first time really seeing her. I was like, whoa, I didn't remember it was Johnny Depp's daughter. So like him, and then you add like Nicholas Hoult and Aaron Taylor Johnson, as you mentioned, and it's like, okay, these guys are just supporting players. I mean, their screen time is probably it's well balanced. You're not focused on Count Orlok, who's essentially the Dracula. Right, you're focused on Lily Rose Depp the most, I would say, in the second half, and then maybe Nicholas Hoult in the first half. Would that be accurate?
I think that's fair. Yeah, I mean, it definitely almost plays like a traditional play, and that your first act sort of
there you go.
Characters, and your second act, and then Willem Dafoe's character gets introduced a bit later in the movie, kind of in the second half of the movie. I do want to give a shout out before I circle back to Lily Rose Depp to Simon McBurney, who plays Knock, who is kind of your just classic, the creepy left hand to Count Orlok. He's just
also uses his left hand in the movie.
Yeah, he does. Lily Rose Depp, I just have to circle back because this is such a physical performance. The last time you were on the show, we talked about Us, the movie, not You and I. The lead in that is really asked to do a lot. Obviously, she's playing two different roles. She, kind of has to defect this sort of, how you doing there, guys? This kind of raspy voice. I can't imagine, as a lion who, believe it or not, has done some acting in the past, when you're asked to do something that is going to look silly and it has to be serious or scary, I don't think there's anything harder to do. Lily Rose Depp is put through the ringer in this movie, from backbends to humping puddles. I mean, she is asked to do things in the script that would make most people burst out in laughter, and she does it in a way that is somehow feels so real. And again, it's easy to balk at a page that says, now you're possessed. But to actually bring that to life in an authentic way that is, I mean, you feel for her. Like, there's a sympathy that comes with it, but it's also scary. I mean, at one point she's possessed by Orlok and doing a voice, and she literally does this back bend that maybe it was supported by some wire work and stuff, but I wouldn't surprise me if this was just a position she hit. She hops up, she's then doing this voice a la The Exorcist, and it all just works so well. And you miss that by just a little bit, and everyone's laughing at you. And it's been a long time since I've seen any actor be tasked with what she's tasked with. She is right out of the gate delivers a performance that I think is freaking phenomenal, and actually a better performance than Bill Skarsgård, because she doesn't have the aid of any prosthetics. It is just her at all times, and I think she is phenomenal. Everyone should see this movie for Lily Rose Depp alone.
That's just phenomenal. That 3 minutes you just did there. Phenomenal. And I saw it in the theater, and then I watched the director's cuts floating on one of those streamers. So there's like an extra, I don't know, 18 minutes of footage or something like that. And then there's, of course, behind the scenes thing. And if I remember correctly, Lily Rose Depp didn't have any wires. She was doing that. They were shocked what they were getting out of her, and she just went for it. Like, she almost deserves like a stunt nomination.
Incredible. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You just see, look, I'm a cat. I am a jungle cat. So I appreciate some limberness in a performance. There's one other thing I want to point out before I get your score, Joe. This movie came out in 2024. 2024 summer was, for those on social media, they knew it as Rat Boy Summer. Rat Boy Summer was a summer that celebrated actors in Hollywood who some say looked a little bit rat-like. This would have been your Timothy Chalamet's, your Taylor Hills, your Jeremy Allens. I'm curious, is it a shame that Nosferatu is not lumped in? Because I don't think you get a better rat boy than him. I mean, this guy is sleeping in a bed of rats, Joe. Before I get your score, I have to know, am I right or wrong in thinking that Nosferatu doesn't get the credit he deserves in Rat Boy Summer?
I don't know if I can answer that, because what I like about Real Talk is Al always comes with some educational things I had no idea even existed. I did not know about this Rat Boy Summer.
Wow, you didn't know about Rat Boy Summer? Do you know about Short King Spring? That's apparently what 2020.
I know what a Short King is, being a 5'7" Italian. No, see, I'm so glad I don't pay attention to social media, because Count Orlok, yeah, I mean, he would be the king of Rat Boy Summer, right?
The Rat Boy King. All right. Look, this is the insight I want. I'm glad there's an exchange of information.
This was very substantial.
Now that you've given me that, or now that I've given you that info of Rat Boy Summer, Short King Spring, you can give me the info of what did you give characters and performances?
10, easy.
10, locking it in. That brings us to visual storytelling. I'll digress when we're talking about Count Orlok. We already talked about how great the performance is. Clearly, there's a level of visual storytelling there with the makeup team and the effects team bringing him to life and bringing to life some of the other characters. But I really want to focus on the cinematography specifically in this picture. This, like I said in the opening, is an extension of a German expressionistic film. German expressionism is a staple of visual storytelling because of its use of shadow and light this is a full color film, but its use of shadow and light is next to Barry Lyndon. I don't know if you get a better use of just natural light.
No, you're exactly right with all that technical stuff that I hope people appreciate. um, but it does. It gives it what all that is too. It's so cheap, but that gives us this supernatural feel. Horror movies and specifically vampire movies rely on the physical bite and blood, right? But this takes this more of a ghostly, haunted route, which is not typically seen in some vampire movies. Really, this movie could be a silent movie. I swear you'd watch all 2 hours and 15 minutes of it, and you would be able to figure out what's going on. You'd still be able to feel the same emotion. It'd be a crime not to hear Lily Rose Depp, as we talk about, but her physicality, like it would come through in a silent movie. It's the biggest compliment I can get, and the cinematography. I wish I kind of came up with this on my own, but I'm going to say I cheated a little bit. It looked familiar. That's all I'll say I saw. Like when I was watching it, I was like, I've seen something like this before. When I watched, as I said, the extended version, I watched a little behind the scenes stuff, which I hardly ever do. Eggers said, he's like, know what this is? A lot of the cinematography? It's Batman Returns.
Wow, really?
And, you know, I put that out there. I was like, do I claim this for myself and look really smart? No, I'm not that guy. But yes, so a lot of he's right. If you look some of the shots, especially the close, tight shots of Orlok,
Yeah.
it's basically how he went tight on the Penguin, Danny DeVito's Penguin, Catwoman, all that. Like he used a lot of the simple rotating camera stuff. That was a lot of Batman Returns. That I think is brilliant. Even though it's like, oh, well, he just copied somebody. Some people, no. He took something that it was a superhero flick and he adapted it to this Gothic masterpiece that is a period piece, as you said. I could just hit mute and just watch it, and I'd still be entertained.
But that's such a great point to bring up, because what it illustrates and what it highlights is the evolution of Gothic American storytelling. Tim Burton, who does Batman Returns, is it kind of almost was the granddaddy of pop culture Gothic filmmaking with Edward Scissorhands and the Batman 89 and Batman Returns. Batman Returns, a movie that was really got a lot of heat when it came out because people thought it was too dark. So to hear that, I mean, Eggers is what, I think 42 in the year of our Lord. So I believe he would have been a very young man and just experienced that as a kid. So to see how he would have very naturally probably saturated that, and now seeing as a grown filmmaker who's making these sort of retelling of modern, I mean, there's a world, you know, where Nosferatu and Batman aren't that terribly different in terms of pop culture and what they're doing and the themes they're traversing. So I think that's a really, really interesting connection to make, Joe. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, visually, the way you pace things, a lot of people say how you pace the story from frame to frame, but it's also like the visual within the scene. This movie is kind of like Jaws. It's not a slow burn. It's methodical. It's simple. It's steady, but it still feels larger than life. I mean, imagine going quick. Like you wouldn't appreciate all those shadows, all the visuals that you're saying, like, because that takes time and that's cool to watch. And plus, you just got to take time to appreciate all that architecture, like that Gothic, like just brilliance of it. Like, why would you want to move fast?
In the last 3 minutes of the movie is such a beautiful, because a lot of times in a movie, especially a longer film, you have your climactic scene and then there's some stuff afterwards. But this movie really does just build until it's over, and it settles really well and really beautifully. But one thing I did see upon multiple viewings, and we'll point out before I get your score, this is a movie about relationships, and everything in the relationships is sort of unspoken and understated, and you could use the word hidden. There's a lot of hidden meanings. There's a lot of hidden subtext. Well, I guess it's not hidden if it's subtext, but there's a lot of subtext. And this happens visually. I would encourage anybody who's maybe watching the film for the first time, or even Joe, the next time you watch it, there's a lot of just hidden images. And the one that stands out to me the most, I noticed that actually the first time I watched it, when Nicholas Holtz Thomas is being given the assignment to go see Orlok, there's a slow push in between the two characters that are talking at the end of the scene, and it just pushes in to this window, and it's raining outside. And when I see that window, all I see is the cross in the middle that's formed by the pane or the frame of the window. And there's just all these really little hidden suggestions of the supernatural, of various things going on, and it just doesn't kind of stop giving me those. So I only offer that one up so people can go look at it, because I want people to find the stuff on their own. But there's all these great just little moments where you find things that you go, oh my god, I never saw that before.
In other words, there's no piss break in this movie. It could be omitted.
That's right, yeah.
I mean, if you're in a theater, there's no piss break. Obviously, if you're home, you can pause it. I'm going to say 10. I'll just get to it.
All right, 10, locking it in. Don't even have to tee him up. That brings us to use of sound. Joe, I've been going on and on, so I'm just going to shut up. I've only got one point that I want to mention about sound. What do you think about the sound in this movie?
It was just perfectly placed. Sometimes you just got to understand, look, you're not going to have a soundtrack. Like, you're not going to buy the album of Nosferatu unless... I would run to this soundtrack.
I love the soundtrack of this movie. I've definitely walked around with this.
Meaning there's no bands, right? It's a musical score.
It's not a Tarantino flick, yeah.
Yeah, it's a composition, and it's so smooth, and it just carries you. That's the hand holding. I think it's like a perfect, going through a haunted house. You get to take everything in. Some of these haunted houses you go to, sometimes you have to go too quick, and you miss things, right? Because you're at other people's pace. This is like, hey, we're going to set the tone early, no pun intended, and we're just going to take you, and you're going to be able to take all this in up until the last note, which is a crescendo of just awesomeness, and it eases you out of everything so well that you went through all the drama and the emotion. So yeah, it's just there. I gotta say, I don't think it was is a level like hey, a John Williams or something like that? No, but it didn't have to be.
I look at it as just sort of an adult lullaby. It's quiet and it's calming, but it's also creepy. The only note I want to bring up about the sound design that is just chilling every time I watch it, when Orlok is feeding on Nicholas Holt, it cuts to this wide shot where Orlok is in the buff, just mounting Holt, just sucking blood out of him, and there's no sound other than just this somebody just finishing a Capri Sun, and it is wet and squishy and visceral, and it is maybe one of the more horrifying things about Orlok on a very long list of horrifying things about Orlok. I love that. I love that. Just
So I knew we didn't plan this. I hope people believe. I knew you would go to one of those things where I always kind of float into the actual musical score, right?
Sure.
But you into the actual sounds of a scene, because you're more technical than I am in certain areas there. And
well, I'm a lion, so I just hear certain notes.
I'm he's going to say how I guess in Saw movies, they amplify up the blood and the gore. Yeah. They try to give you this artificial manufactured sound to complement it. Not musically, but just a sound effect. This did not. This kind of, it's that scene in particular, it is just truly how that would sound if you walked by it.
Oh, it wouldn't surprise me if, I don't know, the sound guy, Eggers, in I almost said Orlok, but Skarsgård, just grabbed a lav at lunch that day, and they said, hey, take a bite into this steak and just suck all the juice out of it. It's like you've never heard somebody sucking blood out of a heart before, but if you did, it would probably sound exactly like this. Well, what do you give the use of sound then, Joe?
When you kind of bring that up, it kind of ups my score. I'm going to say an 8.5.
An 8.5. I love it. All right. Well, that brings us to the final stretch here. We're talking about theme. I think it's very much obviously a love story, but I think it's a story about what it means to sort of love yourself before you can love other people. And if you commit to other people before you truly commit to yourself, you're just always going to kind of be a slave to whatever love you're locked into.
love is obviously the theme of many characters, but it's very different for everybody. Well, this is how Aaron Taylor Johnson's viewpoint of love and relationships and stature in society. And then you have Orlok, who obviously has his desires, and then Lily Rose Depp, who's almost in a conflict, which we've all been to or been in. Like, hey, I'm with this person, but I kind of start to like this person.
But
whatever.
I love this Fu Manchu 7-foot bald corpse. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it about control then? Is the theme less about
Some of that is control, but it's tough to put the theme on it other than it's just we have desires and we will not stop until we achieve those desires. And I think that's everybody. That's somebody that we haven't really talked about a lot is Willem Dafoe.
Yeah.
Who's basically playing the Van Helsing role.
He has the same top hat.
Yes, he has a desire. Even though he's trying to help people contain Orlok, his desire is kind of going to harm them in a way. So it's all about there's a whole thing of selfishness underneath all this. All the good deeds, all the evil, everyone's selfish in a certain regard.
And really only succeed when their selfishness aligns, right? Because it's Lily Rose Depp and Willem Dafoe when their selfish intentions align, which is wanting to kill Orlok, that they successfully do it. And you're right, Willem Dafoe leads Nicholas Hoult on this goose chase, that is strictly just to distract him, brings him closer to achieving his goal, which unfortunately is achieved in the worst way possible for Nicholas Hoult. Boy, if you're going to find out she's cheating, that is not how you want to do it.
No, I mean, that's a tough act to follow.
Although it was a very Christ-like cheating. I mean, she wasn't just cheating because she was in love. She was cheating to, I believe, sacrifice herself to take out this monster who was raining down plague on the city. Yeah, so I don't want to write off, poor Lily Rose Depp's character.
Well, other thing too, I think it's something we might have forgot to bring up, but in the end, this is showcasing a side of pure evil, and you can't one of the most iconic scenes that was shot beautifully, and I'll say it's a spoiler. I want this poster in my room. I don't know what that says about me. When you see this giant Orlok vampire, Skarsgård, and a mother busts in the room, and then you see him, and it's a silhouette of him holding 2 dead babies. One he just finished biting and drops on the floor like nobody's business. The other one he's still holding up and then digs into her in each hand. I mean,
Joe, that is the most badass moment. I'm so glad you brought that up. Every time I talk to someone about this movie, I bring up that scene. That is one of maybe my favorite thing. He just drops that kid like a sack of shit. I mean, he is done. It is the most gangster. If you want to be scary, if you want to make someone menacing, just have him eat a couple kids and then toss them aside because now they're going to get you. I love that.
And they didn't do theater of the mind, which could have been the safe play.
No, there's no Hitchcockian usage at all.
They went with it, and it shows, bringing it back to the whole theme. I bring it up because, Orlok is determined to love and have an existence based on his terms. And when you think, oh, well, he understands love. Yeah, but guess what? That scene we're talking about happens later in the movie, and he is the most evil motherfucker you could think. It just goes to show you evil beings. I think we are even in the world of today, right? There's some evil people out there in power, but they are capable of love. And that's the thing. How do you handle that?
Yeah.
Willem Dafoe has his plan. He's I don't care. Evil trumps the love that person. There's no redemption.
Right.
But there's another angle where Lily Rose Depp, even though she makes a decision at the end, she is kind of conflicted for a little bit. Maybe I could save this guy. Maybe not. I don't know.
He seeks her love in the same way he seeks that blood nourishment. It's just he takes it. It's not a love that's mutual. It's not a love that is embraced or organic. He sees, he wants, he takes. It's animalistic. And you're right, there is a level of connection and humanness there that somehow makes it more scary.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the fact that we can actually pick up on all those subtle things, because if you watch our episode of Us, we may or might appreciate it because it wasn't crafted in a way. Like, look how many things we can pull from this, because why? The movie took its time. It knew what it was. So yes, I know we gotta get to the score.
Yes, I totally agree with you. What do you give the theme 1 out of 10?
I'm gonna go a 9er.
A 9. I love it. All right. Well, Joe, that means we got everything locked in. You gave the plot an 8, the characters and performances a 10. Same with the visual storytelling. Use of sound, you gave an 8.5. And themes, you gave a 9. That's a 91 out of 100. That easily far and away your highest score that you've given so far. Are you comfortable with that, Joe?
Oh, yes.
Great. And
Yeah.
safe to say that's an A plus? What do we...
I think that is at least an A plus, right?
Oh, it's at least an A. I just didn't know if you wanted to add the A plus in there. I mean, you are the official, controller of Joe's grades. So,
Oh, thank you, Al. You know what? This movie deserves an A plus, especially because it's a horror movie in its core. And anytime you can pull all that into a horror movie and still feel like it's a horror movie, that's an A plus.
To your 8, I gave the plot a 9. Characters and performances, we agreed. I gave it a 10. Visual storytelling, we agreed. I gave it a 10. Use of sound, I gave it a 9 to your 8.5, so just a little bit off. And the theme, I did actually give a 7 to your 9, only because I felt like I kind of have explained many times on this show, for a movie to be a 10 out of 10 for me in terms of theme, the movie itself has to kind of become an example of what the movie is discussing. And this movie is obviously not even attempting to do that. It is a retelling, but it does inject a lot of theme into something that maybe didn't have as much before. So I thought it was really strong. Overall, I gave it a 90 to your 91.
All right, we're right on.
But I still give it an A plus because I think that Lily Rose Depp's performance alone elevates this. I think Robert Eggers is a modern master. And I hope he's making movies for another 40 years. These are all incredible pictures. All of your appearances on the show have been incredible, Joe. I'm so glad that you've come back once again. I hope you'll come back to the jungle someday.
I just want to ask before I go, Al, can you give me one more Orlok impression?
Oh, yes. Here we go.
It was lovely having you on the shore, Joe. We hope you will return to the jungle, and remember, if you're going to talk movies, keep it real talk. I don't think I did that correctly.
Oh my God. Well, actually, Joe, why don't you, if I do Orlok, you got to give me a little Lily Rose Depp then.
Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1.
Thanks for listening, and here's a look at the scoreboard from our show. Christina graded The Witch an 86 and an A- to my 90 and A+, with an average of 88 and an A. Landing the highest score on today's show, Jimmy the Toucan gave The Lighthouse a 94 and an A+, to my 100 and an A+, with an average of 97 and an A+. Finally, Joe Belcastro graded Nosferatu a 91 and an A+, to my 90 and an A+, giving it an average of 90.5 and an A+. Please tell me what you graded each film in the comments, as I genuinely want to know. A big thank you to Christina Dobre, whose work is viewable through the links now in our description. Support Joe Belcastro by visiting his website at joebelcastro.com and picking up all his spooky novels. And support Jimmy the Toucan by shopping his merch, leaving a like and nice comment on this episode. Join us next time on episode 13, John Carpenter. Director Justin Tyler is back again to score Halloween. Poison Rana co-founder Braden Harrington debuts to grade They Live. And Sid the Cinema Sloth returns to review one of his favorite films, The Thing. Thanks to the team at Real Digital for producing this episode, and Platinum Plastic, who supplies our show's merchandise on redbubble.com. If you haven't left a like by now, you might as well, and subscribe to the channel, as well as hit the bell icon to be notified when Real Talk drops each week. Thanks for listening, and if you're gonna talk movies, make sure it's Real Talk.
It is a black omen to journey in poor health. You will remain and well rest yourself.
I must object, my lord.
You will obey this my counsel.
But, my lord... Count?